In 1994, a German archaeologist named Klaus Schmidt was surveying farmland in southeastern Turkey when he noticed something in the soil. Limestone, shaped, a lot of it. He started digging. What he found rewrote the timeline of human civilization, and 3 decades later, we're still working out what it means. Beneath that field was a temple complex, 20 enclosures, 200 T-shaped limestone pillars, some of them 18 feet tall and weighing 20 tons, carved with animals in precise relief, arranged in deliberate astronomical orientations. It was 12,000 years old. For context, the pyramids of Giza are 4,500 years old. Stonehenge is 5,000 years old. Göbekli Tepe predates both by more than twice their age. And the people who built it, according to the official timeline at the time of its discovery, were hunter-gatherers, no cities, no agriculture, no writing, no civilization. They weren't supposed to be able to do this. Here's what mainstream archaeology had assumed before Göbekli Tepe was found. The development of civilization followed a specific sequence. Agriculture first, permanent settlements second. Then once people had surplus food and stable communities, they developed religion, art, architecture, and complex social organization. Monuments came last. You had to feed everyone before you could afford to build. Göbekli Tepe broke that model completely. The site predates agriculture in the region by at least 1,000 years. There are no signs of permanent habitation. No houses, no cooking hearths, no trash middens. The people who built it weren't living there. They were traveling to it. Schmidt spent the remaining 20 years of his life excavating it. Before he died in 2014, he estimated that less than 5% of the site had been uncovered. Ground-penetrating radar surveys have since confirmed there are at least 16 additional enclosures still buried. The site covers an area of roughly 22 acres. For comparison, the entire Stonehenge complex covers about 6. What we've seen is a fraction. Among the structures excavated is Enclosure D, and within it, a pillar designated simply as Pillar 43. It has come to be known as the Vulture Stone. The upper panel shows a vulture with a raised wing. Below it, a headless human figure. To the left, what appears to be a scorpion. To the right, other animals arranged in a specific, deliberate sequence. The symbols are not random, decorative carvings. They follow a pattern. In 2017, researchers from the University of Edinburgh published an initial analysis suggesting that the animals on the pillar corresponded to specific constellations, and that their arrangement encoded a date. In August 2024, a follow-up study in the Taylor and Francis journal Time and Mind confirmed and deepened that analysis. The date encoded on Pillar 43 is 10,950 BCE, give or take 250 years. That's not a guess based on the position of one star. It's a calculation derived from the precession of the equinoxes, the 26,000-year wobble of the Earth's axis that slowly shifts which constellations are visible at any given time of year. To encode a specific date using precession, you have to understand precession. The ancient Greeks documented precession around 150 BCE. Hipparchus of Nicaea is credited with its discovery. The builders of Göbekli Tepe were using it as a dating system 10,000 years before that. What happened at 10,150 BCE? This is where the research becomes genuinely unsettling. 10,150 BCE is the midpoint of the Younger Dryas, a period of rapid, catastrophic climate change that began around 12,900 years ago and lasted approximately 200 years. Temperatures in the northern hemisphere dropped by 10 to 15 degrees Celsius within decades. Glaciers reformed. Megafauna went extinct across multiple continents. The archaeological record shows a sharp discontinuity in human populations across North America, Europe, and the Middle East. The leading hypothesis for what triggered the Younger Dryas is a comet impact, or a fragmented comet swarm, striking North America around 12,800 years ago. The evidence, a thin layer of platinum, iridium, and nanodiamond spherules found at geological sites across 4 continents at exactly the same stratigraphic level, a level that corresponds to roughly 10,800 BCE. A 2018 study in the journal Scientific Reports concluded that Pillar 43 at Göbekli Tepe appears to commemorate this impact event. The vulture, the headless human, the scorpion. In ancient Near Eastern symbolism, vultures represented death in sky, headless human figures represented mass casualties, and the constellation Scorpius, in the astronomical position it occupied at 10,950 BCE, was directly overhead at the precise time of year the impact is estimated to have occurred. This is not numerology. It's not retrofitted speculation. These are the conclusions of peer-reviewed researchers at accredited universities publishing in indexed scientific journals. Whoever built Göbekli Tepe was memorializing a catastrophe, and they wanted the memorial to be legible for a very, very long time. This is the part that most people don't know. Göbekli Tepe was not abandoned. It was not destroyed. It was not buried by time. It was buried deliberately. Around 8000 BCE, someone filled in all of the enclosures with soil, gravel, and stone. Systematically, intentionally. The site was sealed and left. The fill material was not random debris. In many places, it contains carefully deposited animal bones and stone tools, as if the burial itself was a ritual act. This is documented. It's not disputed. Archaeologists have published extensively on the intentional nature of the infill. The question no one has answered is why. One interpretation: the site had served its purpose. The memorial had been preserved in a form that would survive. The stone would keep the record longer than any oral tradition, longer than any living memory of those who built it. Once the knowledge was encoded in the pillars needed to be protected, not from invaders or weather, but from the slow entropy of exposure and erosion. Burying them was an act of preservation, not erasure. Another interpretation: something changed. The people who built the site were gone, displaced, dispersed, or destroyed by whatever sequence of events followed the Younger Dryas impact. And the group that came after didn't understand what they had inherited. The burial was the act of a people who knew something important was there, but no longer knew what it meant. Either interpretation requires the same conclusion: that 12,000 years ago, someone had a sophisticated enough understanding of astronomy, mathematics, and long-term thinking to encode information in stone that they intended to survive for millennia. That is not the behavior of hunter-gatherers with no civilization. Here is what we know with confidence. Göbekli Tepe exists. It is 12,000 years old. It predates every other monumental architecture on Earth by thousands of years. It was built by people who, by every prior assumption in archaeology, should not have had the knowledge, coordination, or social structure to build it. Those same people understood precession of the equinoxes. They encoded a specific historical date in stone using astronomical alignments. That date corresponds to a documented catastrophic event that is supported by physical evidence on 4 continents. And then they buried it. The mainstream response to Göbekli Tepe has been to revise the timeline slightly. To say that complex social organization happened earlier than we thought, that religion may have preceded agriculture rather than following it, and that hunter-gatherer societies were more sophisticated than previously assumed. That's a reasonable position, but it doesn't explain the astronomical knowledge. It doesn't explain why they chose those specific constellations. It doesn't explain how a pre-literate, pre-agricultural society independently developed an understanding of a 26,000-year cycle that the ancient Greeks, with writing, cities, mathematics, and centuries of accumulated observation, took until 150 BCE to formally document. The honest answer is that we don't know how they knew. The uncomfortable extension of that answer is, if they knew this, what else did they know? And if there was a catastrophe severe enough to motivate the construction of a 22-acre astronomical memorial, what was lost in it? The site is still 95% unexcavated. Whatever answer exists is probably still in the ground. Next week, the same question applied to a different site, a building in the middle of the Pacific Ocean that the U.S. National Park Service cannot explain. 100,000 pounds of basalt, no quarry, no binding agent, no known method of construction. Subscribe. We're just getting started. Production notes. Voice: Brian, 11 Labs, NPC de Tussi Cheshuris, Devery EN BZ1's QRB. Key sources to cite in description: University of Edinburgh, 2024, Taylor and Francis Time and Mind, Scientific Reports 2018. Younger Dryas Impact Study do not frame as ancient aliens, frame as documented anomaly, unanswered question. The tone is a scientist presenting evidence, not a conspiracy theorist speculating. Rare. SEO tags Göbekli Tepe, ancient civilizations, oldest structure, Younger Dryas, Comet impact, precession equinoxes, Pillar 43 Vulture Stone, ancient astronomy, suppressed history, prehistoric civilization, Göbekli Tepe decoded, archaeological mystery, ancient knowledge, hunter-gatherer civilization myth.